Born of not flesh but forged in a lab by a group of scientists known as the Enclave, Adam Warlock was first only known as him. Created to be the perfect human, he emerged from his cocoon radiating golden skin, cosmic awareness, and the kind of hair that belongs on a space metal album cover. But perfection proved problematic. He rejected his creators, left Earth, and found a calling among the stars, eventually getting his name and his first real sense of purpose from the High Evolutionary who gifted him the name Warlock and the task of protecting a planet called Counter-Earth. From there, Adam's journey became a kaleidoscope of cosmic crisis and personal agony. He didn't just wield power, he questioned it, he bore it, and broke under it even. The Soul Stone was his closest companion and his most terrible curse. It allowed him to rip souls from bodies while constantly threatening his own. It whispered to him and became a part of him, shaping him into a tragic, divine figure with godlike abilities and the soul of a tortured philosopher. Warlock's most infamous adversary wasn't merely a villain, it was himself. In a classic twist of existential dread, Adam saw a future in which he would become Magus, a cold, dark reflection of his potential. Determined to defy his destiny, he waged war against his own future, even if it meant madness and death. Adam Warlock's powers are as mystic and fluid as the man himself. It's less of a checklist of abilities and more of an extension of his cosmic role as being caught between godhood and humanity. At his core, he possesses strength, speed, durability, and energy manipulation far beyond most mortals. He can fly unaided through the vacuum of space, channel blasts of pure cosmic force from his hands, and survive wounds that would obliterate nearly any other hero. But those are surface abilities, the visible edge of something deeper. Adam's mind is hyper-evolved, allowing him to resist telepathic intrusion and perceive threats on a metaphysical level. His soul, which is strangely tangible and fiercely protected, grants him insight into moral and spiritual forces that shape the universe. Perhaps his most iconic trait is his connection to the Soul Stone. Though it has come and gone from his brow, it wants to find him, granting him dominion over souls, enabling his sense of purity or corruption, and allowing him to trap the essence of others within a pocket dimension inside the gem itself. The power was staggering, but it came at a cost. The gem was sentient, whispering, hungering, and often turned Adam's mercy into torment. Even after separating from it, the scars lingered, not just physical, but moral, emotional, and existential. Adam Warlock's cycle of death and rebirth is not metaphorical, it's literal. When his body is pushed past its limits, when death becomes inevitable or transformation is required, Adam encases himself in an organic golden cocoon of energy. Within this chrysalis, time bends, he heals, he evolves, he reawakens. Each resurrection is more than a recovery, it's a reinvention. He often emerges changed, sometimes subtly, sometimes drastically, more powerful, more unstable, or carrying new burdens of insight. The cocoon is not just a biological defense mechanism. It's a symbol of his journey, where most heroes break or fall. Adam sheds his skin, confronts the consequences of who he's been, and steps into who he must become next. One of Adam Warlock's most iconic trials was facing against Magus, a future version of himself twisted by power and religious delusion. Discovering that he would one day become this dark being was less of a villain reveal and more of an existential reckoning. In order to stop Magus, he traveled through time and erased that timeline by stealing his own soul, killing a possible version of himself to prevent the corruption before it began. It wasn't just a victory, but more like a surgical strike against fate itself. Another profound moment came when Adam found himself wielding all 6 Infinity Stones after helping lead the charge against Thanos, who had assembled them into the infamous Infinity Gauntlet. With reality itself in the balance, it was Warlock who took the gauntlet from Thanos, not with brute force, but with cosmic insight and the trust of the universe's greatest minds. Once in possession of ultimate power, he did what no one expected. He split the stones among others, forming the Infinity Watch to keep them safe, and he also removed his own good and evil sides to wield the gauntlet more objectively. But in doing so, he became less human. Balanced, sure, but emotionally hollow, a god amputated of his soul. Warlock's relationship with Thanos also evolved into something uniquely layered. They were enemies, allies, and philosophical foils, cosmic titans circling the same existential questions but from opposite angles. When Thanos died for a temporary time, Warlock mourned him not as a foe, but as a kindred spirit, a dark mirror he had come to understand, if not forgive. In one of his more grounded but equally important arcs, Adam briefly joined the Guardians of the Galaxy. He was often the brooding soul in the corner, meditating on morality while the others bickered over snacks and strategies. Yet, even among chaos and sarcasm, Warlock brought perspective, often acting as the conscience of the team when things turn truly dire. In Adam Warlock's later life, the pattern of death, rebirth, and moral ambiguity only deepened, becoming not just a part of his mythos, but the marrow of his existence. He no longer fought simply to save others, he fought to understand the increasingly blurred lines between salvation and damnation, between who he was and who the universe needed him to be. After the collapse of the Infinity Watch and the fallout from the Gauntlet saga, Adam drifted once more into isolation, withdrawing into the metaphysical planes where few dared follow. He had tasted the omnipotence and found it hollow, seen gods and tyrants become indistinguishable, and he no longer trusted himself with either the power or peace. One of his most jarring returns saw him confronting Magus again, not as his hypothetical future, but as a real and resurrected evil. Yet even in battle, Adam struggled to destroy him, knowing that Magus was not just an enemy, but a truth, a reminder that Adam could never be entirely free of his potential for tyranny. In the same era, he faced a newer version of himself, Adam Warlock of the future, acting under desperate but constructive logic to save the universe at any cost. These confrontations weren't simple fights, they were intimate dissections of identity, morality, and the trauma of knowing yourself too well. He became less of a golden savior and more of a weary soldier, no less powerful but far more introspective. When he did fight, it was with the weight of every version of himself whispering in his ear, some hopeful, but some monstrous. Adam's emotional landscape remained as complex as ever. Connections were rare, relationships were brief or tragic. He bore every betrayal, every mistake. He wasn't just wrestling with good and evil anymore. He was wrestling with exhaustion, with legacy, and with the unbearable burden of always coming back. By his later years, Adam Warlock had transcended the label of hero. He had become something stranger, lonelier, and arguably more noble. A man forged by failure who still chose to try, not because he believed he could win, but because not trying would mean surrendering to the very darkness he spent a lifetime holding back. Adam Warlock is not a hero in the traditional sense. He is a question wrapped in golden skin, walking the edge between salvation and self-destruction. His story isn't about triumph in the face of evil, but about the long, painful reckoning with the evil that lives within oneself. Every time he rises from his cocoon, he does so burdened by the knowledge of who he was, who he might become, and who he might still try to be despite it all. His life was a looping cycle of growth, failure, and sacrifice, echoing the uncomfortable truth that wisdom rarely comes without loss, and that power, no matter how pure its origin, always demands a cost. From his battles with Thanos to his eternal war with Magus, the literal embodiment of his worst potential, Warlock's greatest conflicts are not victories over others, but over his own desire, doubt, and despair. He teaches us that self-awareness in a battlefield, that knowing yourself is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of the hardest one. He shows us that perfection is a myth, that the pursuit of it often leads to ruin, and that only real heroism lies in continuing anyway. In choosing restraint when you could rule, humility when you could conquer, and redemption when you're haunted by all the reasons you don't deserve it. Adam Warlock is not a god who saves the universe. He's a man who questions it, a cosmic wanderer who turns inward even as galaxies burn around him. And in doing so, he reminds us that true strength is not found in certainty, but in reflection. That no matter how far you fall or how many versions of yourself you need to face, you can still choose to rise again and again and try to be better. Not perfect, but just better.